Colorful streets, rust-free classic cars, and rhythmic salsa melodies ringing in your ears with every step. Which country does all this remind you of? I'm sure most of you know the answer. Cuba, of course. But is this unique country just about these things? Of course not. Cuba is also a country of people who never stop dancing and are always friendly, despite embargoes, revolutions, and prolonged hunger. In fact, there is more to it than just cigars and Che Guevara, which come to mind for many of you. You will be amazed by what you are about to see and hear, and you will agree with me. Then let's get started right away. Looking at the map, we see that Cuba, with an area of 110,000 square kilometers, is strategically located in the heart of the Caribbean Sea. Don't be fooled by the small size of this island nation, which is located north of the United States. Approximately 12 million people live in Cuba. Havana, the capital city known as a dream destination for foreign visitors and the heart of the country, is one of the most populous and vibrant cities in the country, with an official population exceeding 2.5 million. And more than just a capital city, it is a living museum where the spirit of Cuba is most intensely felt, with music and history intertwined in its streets. Since we're talking about history, let's take a deep dive into the past of this unique country. Located in the middle of the Caribbean, this island paradise owes its rich cultural fabric to centuries of diverse interactions. This process began in 1492, when Christopher Columbus discovered the island and incorporated it into Spanish territory, quickly establishing it as a permanent settlement. This created a unique blend of Spanish immigrants, Africans, and other ethnic groups, laying the foundation for Cuba's multicultural identity today. However, Cuba's modern history has been marked by turbulent periods, particularly with the rise of the United States, which deeply disrupted the country's political balance. This situation paved the way for the emergence of charismatic revolutionary leaders like Fidel Castro, who reshaped the nation's destiny. Castro's revolution on July 26, 1959, put an end to the United States' unjust socio-economic structure and heralded the beginning of a new era. Of course, the legendary leader Che Guevara was also one of the symbolic figures of this revolution. Post-revolutionary Cuba has achieved significant social gains in areas such as education and healthcare, yet the breakdown in relations with the US and the comprehensive economic embargo that has lasted for over 60 years continue to be part of the country's economic development and modern life. However, despite all these challenges and revolutionary narratives, Cuba continues to attract and captivate millions of tourists from around the world each year with its timeless history, vibrant energy, and warm-hearted people. If you wish to visit Cuba, you must first obtain a tourist card. This card allows you to enter the country without any issues and travel comfortably throughout your trip. Obtaining this card is not difficult at all. For a fee ranging from $25 to $75, you can easily obtain it from Cuban consulates or authorized visa centers. However, you need to be aware of the following. This card initially offers a 30-day stay. Since the Cuban government stamps this tourist card instead of your passport, the card is very important when entering and leaving the country. Of course, some of you may want to stay in Cuba for more than 30 days. There is no need to worry about this. While in Cuba, you can apply to the immigration offices to extend this period twice more. Yes, you heard correctly. Thanks to this flexibility, you can experience a unique culture and enjoy island life for a full 3 months. However, you need to be aware of the following. This card initially offers a 30-day stay. Since the Cuban government stamps this tourist card instead of your passport, the card is very important when entering and leaving the country. Of course, some of you may want to stay in Cuba for more than 30 days. There is no need to worry about this. While in Cuba, you can apply to the immigration offices to extend this period twice more. Yes, you heard correctly. Thanks to this flexibility, you can experience a unique culture and enjoy island life for a full 3 months. Although Spanish is the official language in Cuba, if you are planning a tourist trip, English will make communication much easier. However, in my opinion, the biggest challenge for tourists is not communication problems, but unfortunately some exorbitant prices. For example, when you first arrive in the country, you may be asked to pay between $5 and $15 for a 5-minute ride from the airport. While many countries struggle with taxes and economic issues, such prices in Cuba stem from the country's heavy reliance on tourism as a source of income. This situation leads the local population to view tourists as a kind of walking ATM. You also need to be very careful when shopping in Cuba. If you want to buy something or a service while traveling around the country, I recommend bargaining. For example, if a taxi driver asks for $30, don't accept it right away. You can find other taxis at more reasonable prices without even bargaining. However, since it's obvious that you're a tourist, be aware that prices won't drop much. On the other hand, taking a tour of Havana in those famous old American cars that have become a symbol of Cuba is truly a unique experience. For this special experience, you may need to pay an average of $20 to $30 per hour. When you start traveling in Cuba, the first thing you will encounter is people filling the streets. The locals don't really like staying at home. You can usually see everyone sitting outside, chatting with each other, or just watching the surroundings. This is one of the most obvious signs of Cuba's warm and social nature. The houses I'm talking about are generally at least 40 years old and quite far from modern standards. Most of the houses have cracked plaster, peeling paint, and even rusty windows. You can see this scene not only in small settlements, but also in the historic buildings in the center of the capital, Havana. These houses stand as silent witnesses to Cuba's past and its struggle for survival. When you look at houses in Cuba from the outside, you get the feeling that they might collapse with the slightest breeze. This is true not only for the exterior, but also for the interior. If you enter a Cuban home, you will understand what I mean much better. Most homes lack modern-day standards of plumbing and electrical systems. On the other hand, the walls of the houses may feel as though they are closing in on you, and this can even lead to a mental breakdown for some. However, despite all these drawbacks, if you choose to stay in such local homes instead of a hotel, you will find that real Cubans rent out their rooms at much more affordable prices. This way, you can both save money and have the opportunity to experience the real life of Cuba up close. In addition, Cuba is known by many people and countries around the world as a socialist state. So what does this mean? If a country defines itself as socialist, it is expected to meet the basic needs of its citizens, such as food, drink, and shelter. However, in Cuba, the opportunities provided by the state unfortunately do not satisfy the people and do not meet their needs. This situation forces people to work to make ends meet, and the concept of socialism unfortunately loses its true meaning. In this context, although Cuba is governed according to socialist principles, it cannot provide its citizens with a comfortable life and cannot fully resist the embargoes imposed by foreign countries, particularly the United States, for over 60 years. As a result, people are suffering from hunger and livelihood difficulties due to the effects of both the embargoes and internal economic structural issues, and are forced to work under inhumane conditions to survive. If you have the opportunity to speak with people in Cuba, you can easily hear their thoughts on how socialism has failed to deliver the expected benefits. Under these difficult conditions, the sole aim of the Cuban people is, quite literally, to survive. Although they face great difficulties in this regard, they know that criticizing the state or chanting political slogans carries heavy penalties. Expressing their grievances or even talking freely among themselves can result in prison sentences of up to 10 years. In such a repressive environment, the people find entertainment and freedom only in eating, listening to music, and dancing. This is one of the strongest proofs of their joy of life and resilience. When we look deeply into the country's economy, it is quite normal for many people not to have cell phones. This is because a person working in Cuba earns in an hour what a person working in a standard job earns in a minute. However, these economic difficulties do not diminish the local people's joy of life and happiness. On the contrary, they often overcome this situation by gathering together to dance and chat. For Cubans, music and dance are the greatest passions in life and a refuge that makes them forget all their troubles. That is why the people's greatest pleasure is to drink rum and smoke cigars to the rhythm of music. Even though the rest of the story is about scarcity and poverty, people are still very hopeful and manage to enjoy themselves to the fullest. This resilience shows their attitude towards life and their ability to maintain their joy. When you visit Cuba, you will notice that people hardly care about your nationality or ethnic background. Their main goal is to find a common topic with you and establish a connection. However, I advise you not to be immediately swayed by this warm-hearted attitude, for often their true intention is to extract money from you. You also need to pay close attention to your clothing style in this regard. In countries like Cuba, where poverty levels are high, wearing valuable clothing, jewelry, or accessories can lead to you being constantly stopped or facing the risk of being robbed. Some people may even ask you questions repeatedly to find out your needs. They may offer to help you with services like the internet, hotels, taxis, or food, and then disappear after taking their commission. In this regard, I strongly recommend that you thoroughly research the country beforehand, especially if you plan to visit places like Cuba, where economic issues and livelihood struggles are worsening day by day. Taking every step consciously is crucial for both your safety and the quality of your travel experience. One of the most striking aspects of Cuba is that private schools and healthcare are completely free. This provides great convenience in accessing basic services despite difficult living conditions. On the other hand, the use of vehicles is quite limited, except for certain areas, especially in the capital Havana. Therefore, you will see most people traveling by horse-drawn carriage, riding bicycles, or walking. Of course, the main reason for this situation is the extremely high gasoline prices in Cuba. Even if people own a motor vehicle, they are forced to opt for non-motorized vehicles because they cannot afford to fill their tanks. In the country, gasoline use is primarily limited to those who transport tourists or are involved in the automobile industry. The rest of the population turns to alternative and more economical modes of transportation. Cuba is undoubtedly famous worldwide for its iconic, colorful classic cars. However, behind this visual feast lie serious problems when the cars break down. This is because the country's long-standing isolation and embargo from the United States makes it incredibly difficult to obtain spare parts, to the extent that when a car's original engine breaks down, instead of searching for suitable replacement parts, it is often replaced with a Mercedes engine imported from abroad, such as Germany. This situation serves as a striking example of the creativity of Cubans and how they find solutions despite limited resources. Another striking aspect of Cuba is its unique nightlife. The country's vibrant nightlife offers an atmosphere where music and dance seem to penetrate the soul. The capital city of Havana and its historic district, La Habana Vieja, are the heart of the nightlife. Here you can hear salsa music on every corner and find yourself instantly swept up in the dancing crowd. Moreover, the drinks that are an indispensable part of these nights are also quite affordable in the places I mentioned. For example, you can enjoy a unique rum cocktail such as a mojito or Cuba Libre for an average price of between $3 and $5. However, it is not the cocktails that really color these nights, but the country's unique women. Cuban women stand out for their energy and natural beauty. They typically have curvy figures, striking eyes, and a bronze complexion, and many of them have a unique beauty that shines through even without makeup. Their hair is usually thick and curly, giving them an exotic look. Of course, these are just their physical features. These beautiful women also stand out for their confident, cheerful, and friendly demeanor. Their passion for dancing is evident in every move they make, adding an irresistible charm to their appeal. On the other hand, these unique women's interactions with tourists are usually warm and sincere. However, don't let this closeness fool you. Although they may approach you with polite conversation at first, most of them aim to spend more time with you and receive gifts and money in return. Given the country's economic hardship and conditions, this has become a strategy for them to survive. Due to these difficulties, the women of the country are willing to engage in such relationships to support their families and themselves. On the other hand, beneath these women's flirtatious behavior, there is often a deep melancholy and uncertainty about the future. However, they never show this, because they are focused on living in the moment and finding joy even under current conditions. This demonstrates that Cuba's nightlife is not merely about entertainment, but also a complex stage where human stories unfold. And finally, I will discuss perhaps the most frustrating aspect of Cuba: internet access. Internet connectivity in the country is quite limited. Outside of luxury hotels, it is nearly impossible to find internet access in many low-budget accommodations. The same applies to restaurants. Even if you manage to access the internet somehow, you may not be able to access the sites you want, because the Cuban government restricts access to many popular websites. This situation is not only frustrating for you, but also for the local people living in Cuba. However, if you still want internet access, you can now find SIM cards with high-speed internet in many places. These SIM cards are the most practical solution to maintain your connection with the outside world during your trip. In conclusion, Cuba is an extremely magnificent destination with a great deal of diversity. If we put all the negatives aside, it is definitely a country worth exploring and seeing. That is why I highly recommend visiting it at the earliest opportunity. If you have been there before, please share your thoughts. Everyone deserves the chance to experience its colorful streets, unique women, magnificent history, and warm-hearted people. If you enjoyed my documentary, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like the video, and leave a comment. See you next week.